Board, we will now turn to 11.0, which is the superintendent's report. And I know there's a lot of good things going on, Dr. Little, so we're looking forward to hearing your report this month. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Little for his report.
Well, thank you very much. Of course, we've got some very interesting things on the report tonight, but I do want to also just echo, again, thank you so much for all of your service as school board members. We greatly appreciate that, and for all that you do for our community. We really appreciate it. So I just wanted to echo that again. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Salters tonight so we can talk about Beechwood Middle School. I see Ms. Jenkinson in the audience, and so I know there's a lot of excitement about what we're going to talk about. So, Mr. Salters.
Thank you, Dr. Little. Members of the board, of course, tonight we are here for first reading of the attendance lines for Beechwood Middle School, but before we do that, I'd like to briefly show you some pictures of the campus. It's changing every day, even though it seems to be a rainforest over that site. Somehow we got a picture with the sun shining. It might be photoshopped. But you can see a lot of progress has been made since the board was last out on a visit. This is a front view of the school. We've got our main entry right there in the middle of that shot, and you can see the roof deck is covering all of the building now, which helps us. We now have some windows installed, and those are continuing to come in, which helps us get it dried in, and we'll really hopefully start to turn some heat on here soon. But you can see the site conditions we're dealing with, a lot of mud around the perimeter of the site, but the contractor's doing a great job continuing the progress despite that torrential rain that we've continued to have. This is a shot of the main entry. We'll have our secured entrance there. Will be the primary point of entry for our parents and students. This is a view of the courtyard. You're actually looking on the right-hand side there at the media center, and then on the left are two art classrooms that have a view out of that courtyard space. This is the cafeteria space on the right here. We'll have some outside dining opportunities for our students on pretty days like this one was. Interior, the main interior space there, the right will be our media center, and this is the main stairwell going up to the second floor. You see the windows in that wall. Those are highlighted in the theme of ones and zeros, and hopefully modifying that coding theme that we'll have at this school and STEM opportunities that I know that the students will see many of as they enter the walls here. This is a shot looking back the other way out towards the main entrance. The front office area is right there in the bottom of that view. And we lost the presentation. Josh, can you get it? Maybe. You need me to hit something? Maybe you did. That's why I messed up. All right. So that's a shot looking out into the media center. Hopefully we'll continue on here. Again, from the second story in the media center area there. And then this is a shot from the cafeteria. Those are the serving lines on the far wall there. And then as we do at many of our middle schools, we have a little elevated stage area there. And then this is in the performing arts little theater. So looking back from the stage onto into the sound room there. This is a shot of the stage area. About a 500-seat little theater, which is comparable in size to other middle schools of this size. This is the gymnasium. We're glad to see actually a dry floor there. It's been almost like a pool for a while with water in there. In one of our band rooms. So those are the shots we have. I'll be glad to answer any questions about the construction before we move into the attendance lines if you have any. Okay.
I think I ask you this every time, but I just like to say it out loud. This is a prototype school, and this is the school we will be building out in Pelion.
That's correct.
Yeah.
This will be used 2 more times in the current building plan. It'll be for the Pelion Middle School replacement and also the Lexington Middle School replacement.
Thank you.
And we are slated to open on time, so that's the best news. So talking about Beechwood, I'm sorry.
On
Mr.
time with 100 days, over 100 days of rain,
Yes, sir.
that this contractor has stayed on schedule.
Yes, sir. Doing an excellent job. Talking about attendance lines, which is becoming quite the conversation most folks are interested in these days in our community. So tonight I bring you first reading of these attendance lines. And just to kind of remind you, when we're drawing attendance lines, we have some rationale that we use. We try to use our facilities efficiently. We want to use our permanent spaces as efficiently as possible. We try to minimize the division of subdivisions, so we try not to go through a subdivision and split students from that neighborhood into different schools. We consider balance of student demographics. We do allow for future student growth in our permanent facilities, so the idea is that you may not fill up a new building right away because you know growth is going to occur around that facility. We do consider transportation patterns, focusing on safe travel. So we look at do I have to take a right out of this neighborhood or do I have to take a left out of this neighborhood? Those kind of things, and take those situations into account. We utilize natural and major road boundaries where possible, so rivers and streams, major roadways, to divide up attendance lines. And of course, the goal in this exercise is to provide reduced enrollment at Lexington Middle, Meadow Glen Middle, and Pleasant Hill Middle. And you'll see that we're able to affect that. So these are the current boundaries for the 3 middle schools. You can see Pleasant Hill at 12:05. This morning we were actually, Matt Warren and I were working on this presentation, and that was at 12:04. He pulled the number again, it was 12:05. They enrolled a student today. Lexington Middle School was 998, and even better than Pleasant Hill, Meadow Glen was at 10:30 yesterday, and today we pulled the number and it was 10:40. So they actually enrolled 10 students in that period of time. So it's really amazing the shift in enrollment that occurs in our communities. So you can see a large number of students split across those 3 current facilities, and we are working to alleviate that. And so these are the proposed attendance lines that we're putting for you out tonight for first reading. And I'll speak on the feeder patterns on the next slide, but basically what we've done in the Beechwood attendance area is we've taken all of the Rocky Creek Elementary School students and put them in Beechwood Middle. We've also taken all of Lake Murray Elementary and put them in Beechwood Middle, and then a portion of New Providence goes to Beechwood Middle. And so if that line running down the middle of the screen there looks familiar to you, this line, you can see my red pointer there, that is our high school boundary. And so on the left side of that boundary is the Lexington High School attendance area. On the right side of that boundary is the River Bluff attendance area. One of the key things that our middle schools were asking us to look at in this rezoning effort is to create a true feeder pattern for these middle schools. At elementary schools, it's not as important to have a true feeder, but in middle schools, you start getting into performing arts, you start getting into high school athletics. And so currently in this pattern now, Lexington Middle School, that line, that high school boundary is right here. And so a portion of the Lexington Middle School students go to Lexington High and a portion go to River Bluff. And so in this proposal, we have true feeders. The interesting thing about this is that if you do the math, there are 1,617 students here, and excuse me, and I think it's 1,606 on this side. So there are 11 students roughly that are in the balance there between the two groupings. So these are projected numbers, and so a lot of factors go into what this will look like next year. One obviously is the growth in these communities. Another is the impact of grandfathering. We'll talk about that here in just a second. And so these are the best guesses that we have at this point of estimation. We have involved our consultant, Malone and McBroom, in this process. Those are the folks who did our original growth study. And so we feel good about, these lines and what they accomplish for our students going forward. So if you look at the middle school feeder pattern breakdown, as I mentioned earlier, Beechwood Middle, we have Rocky Creek, Lake Murray, and then a portion of New Providence. Lexington Middle School actually takes in a portion of New Providence, a portion of Lexington Elementary, a portion of Midway, and a portion of Meadow Glen. And then Meadow Glen also takes a portion of Meadow Glen Elementary, Midway, and Oak Grove. And then Pleasant Hill takes in all of Pleasant Hill Elementary and a portion of Deerfield and Lexington Elementary. Excuse me. And then in the high school feeder pattern, as I mentioned, you have a true feeder. So Beechwood, all of Beechwood goes to Lexington High. All of Lexington Middle goes to River Bluff. All of Meadow Glen goes to River Bluff. And all of Pleasant Hill would go to Lexington High School. And so, as I mentioned, for grandfathering, in the past, as we've done these rezoning efforts, we have allowed the students who are the kind of the senior class, if you will, at the given grade level to be able to have a choice to stay and or go to their new place. And so current 7th graders that are affected by the rezoning in each of these locations have the option to stay at their current school for the 8th grade year. We do not provide transportation, or no special bus routes are available for those students because we will be running routes for the new schools within those areas. But if they can provide transportation, they do have the ability to stay in that current school. And we have some key dates. This is a very community-driven effort. We want community input in this process, and so tonight is the first date that we're working through, first reading here. We have 3 community input meetings. Board members, if you'll jot these dates down, we would love for your participation at these meetings. Lexington Middle School on the 29th, Pleasant Hill on the 30th, and then Meadow Glen on the 31st. Trying to get all 3 communities, within the week, so they all kind of get the information at the same time. We'll do a brief presentation, and then we'll have stations set up so that community members can come and ask questions. And then also there's a feedback form that we will collect feedback at these meetings. We will assimilate that feedback, share that with the board, and also get input from you guys on your thoughts, and we'll bring that for second reading at your normal board meeting in February. And then again, go through and hear additional feedback and considerations, and then bring for third and final reading on the March board meeting. This has a lot of implications for staffing, as you can imagine. Mr. Stacy is heavily involved with the staff at the schools, and then Mr. Butler, from a budgeting standpoint, also involved in FTE allocation and so forth. So there's a lot of things that have to happen after these lines are finalized. But with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
But before the board asks a question, would
Yes,
you
sir.
do me a favor? Would you go back to the proposed attendance lines?
Yes, sir.
And talk about the major land areas on how you tried to break it up out beyond just the high school zone, very quickly.
Sure. So just to orient you, if I can get the pointer, there it goes. It's on the 900 right now, if you can see it. And so Highway 1 is here, right here. 378 is going to be right here. Obviously, Beechwood sits on 378. So that gives you an idea of the area there. We've got Pleasant Hill Middle School sitting right here. So you've got Raw Road in here. And of course, this being I-20 down here, major, highway, interstate, you can see there. My pointer is now over here on 728. And so we've made some adjustments where we've picked up, Pleasant Hill used to be this huge attendance area up through here. And so we've shifted a little bit of Pleasant Hill this way to pick up this high school attendance line. And then we've shifted some of Lexington Middle School over. Mineral Springs Road is right in here. And so we've shifted this line over to pick up some of the Meta Glen schools, Meta Glen students, and then some of this area here up towards the lake as well. And so 378 obviously continues on through here. And then you've got Corley Mill. The main road that you would be interested in here is Mineral Springs, where that line is shifted over. And we haven't changed anything on the perimeter for your reference. So all of these outer boundary lines, this will be the Gilbert community here. You get into Carolina Springs Middle here, and you get into White Knoll Middle over here. These boundaries have not changed at all. Of course, that's our district boundary over here on the right-hand side. But none of the perimeter boundaries have changed.
Mr. Salters, I seem to recall several months ago talking about the attendance lines just theoretically. And this looks like it's going to accomplish what you had mentioned, which was for those Rocky Creek parents that were taking one student that way and one student that way to Pleasant Hill Middle. Now their elementary and middle schools are at least in the same direction for those that are on this side of Highway 1.
Right, and so some of the early discussions that we had, we looked at some options for, basically dividing that area here. And if you do that, you're going to potentially have Rocky Creek Elementary, which these folks are Rocky Creek Elementary. They could potentially have to go up here to Rocky Creek and then come back down here to Pleasant Hill to drop a student off. And so in this scenario, these folks will come right up Cox Ferry Road, which is right here, come up Cox Ferry, drop off at Rocky Creek, hit Spring Hill, and drop off at Beechwood. So it keeps the traffic flow in a consistent pattern. It will also make a big difference, those folks who are on the Pleasant Hill campus in the mornings. Pleasant Hill is about 1,200 students now, as I said, so it's going to make a big difference not having that many students in that drop-off in the morning for those folks.
One of our goals, as we're all aware, is reduce our use of portables. So I presume this redistribution will eliminate the need for portables?
It should at Pleasant Hill for now.
Okay.
For now. At Meta Glen, at Meta Glen, we may still have a few portables. And as you recall, we are going to be able to replacement school here for Lexington Middle School. So right now it's 728 students, and eventually when that school opens, of course it's a model after this Beechwood School, which is an initial capacity of 1,200 students. You will see some transition from Meta Glen over to Lexington Middle School as soon as additional capacity is created with that new facility, and then at that point, we should be able to accommodate all the students at Meta Glen without portables. So that's the goal. You'll have two larger capacity schools, one in each kind of high school attendance zone, if you will, and then one a little bit smaller capacity with Pleasant Hill and Meta Glen supporting the students in those areas. It's pretty interesting how closely split the population is and how consistent the growth is on both sides of that high school attendance line.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised the numbers are as close as they are because,
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty shocking. So.
Yeah.
Mr. Salters, can we talk about the mechanics of this for a minute? I know in the past, we've had on our website, you've had the ability, I believe, to plug in either your address or your neighborhood, and you could see exactly what your house or home is zoned for. Will we have that uploaded so people can see that pretty quickly?
Yes, ma'am, we will. We will have a link. I believe it's going to go live. I'm looking for Matt. He was out here. It's going to go live tomorrow, I think. Yeah, we have a link where we can actually make it live. We'll do that tomorrow, and that allows people to go in and look at these lines and their current lines as well. So they'll be able to check their address, and it'll pop up what school they're zoned for.
Okay. And then going back through the mechanics again, we will have 3 readings for this.
Yes.
And so tonight's the first reading, and I would like to let the community know that we're very interested in their feedback. I'm an old timer. I've been on the board 18 years, and I've been through many of these. I had one man tell me he wanted to punch me in the face. And if Miss Mitchum is still here, I think she left. She was standing beside me, and all of a sudden she was gone. I don't know where she went. So people do get a little heated about this, but my point being, we are very interested in your feedback. We are very interested in what you have to say, and we're very interested in how this impacts your child in your neighborhood. So at these meetings, we're going to have forms that you can fill out and tell us, you know, your concerns. And if you love it, we want to hear that as well. You can also go online and fill the forms out. And then at the additional readings, we welcome your public comments. We ask that you come and share your thoughts with us if you have a thought about it. And Ms. Jenkinson, I know, is going to be our principal at our new school. She welcomes hearing any concerns or questions you may have as well. But this is a group enterprise. We're not saying this is the final product. And I can honestly say, in my 18 years of serving on the school board, not once has the board voted on the original lines, because we listen to you and we want to know what you think and what you say. I can remember one of my very first ones. We had a neighborhood that they literally could not turn left out of their neighborhood once the traffic started going. And it was a big neighborhood, and they asked us to change the line because they wanted to be able to turn right. And believe me, we hear that, and we know, because traffic in the morning in Lexington is not easy. So we want your feedback. We want to know what you think, and we will take that very seriously when we come to vote on the final product. But as you see, we've got a lot of steps to get there, and we hope you'll attend the meetings and give us your feedback. Is there anything I left out, Mr. Salters?
No, ma'am. I would just like to say that additionally, Ms. Hill in the Communications Department will be doing a press release with this information, I believe later tonight or tomorrow. And, you know, this presentation will be available online as well. So folks can get to the link, and actually, if they can't read this map, they can just put their address in, but you can also see this map and the presentation for additional input. So it's really a team effort. Matt Warren in my office is done tons of work behind the scenes with this. Really appreciate his efforts, and then our communications department getting involved and really supporting us through the communication effort here. So we're looking forward to the community input, and you know, happy to answer any other questions that the board may have
Well,
tonight.
I think it looks good. It's really clean. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I like that you use the major boundaries. And I think the things that we've always been known for in Lexington 1, that we grandfather the children if they want to be grandfathered, and the fact that we don't divide neighborhoods, I think speaks volumes for us staying committed to our families and our children. Board, are there any other questions or comments, Dr. Guyton?
Yeah, it's funny you bring up left turns, because left turns out of an elementary school are tough. And with this, you're having to turn left out of Rocky Creek and having to turn left out of Lake Murray to make your way back to Beechwoods if it's an absolute feeder, which makes sense. I mean, don't get me wrong. But I guess the question is, how do y'all go about evaluating when is the time to put, for example, an officer there to direct traffic and those kind of things? Because right now, a lot of Rocky Creek parents feed to the right, going to
Correct.
Pleasant Hill Middle, with a lot of the southern neighborhoods, you know, home south of Rocky Creek. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to shift that to a left-hand turn, and it can be quite
Right.
It can be quite trying to make a left-hand.
Correct. So your question is, how do we evaluate for an officer to be put there? We look at that each each year. And, you know, as you're aware, each year, you know, we have different populations of students who ride the bus and different populations of students whose parents drop off. And so we evaluate that with the county, if it's a county school, and with the town, if they're in the town, to look at the traffic flow and the overall impact of traffic on the sites. Generally, the first week of school, we try to get as much help there as we can.
That's a great week, by the way.
Right. And then the further along we get into that, you know, pattern, if you will, we'll make some adjustments. I'll be honest with you, sometimes the town has more resources to help us with the town schools than the county does. And so we try where we can to provide county assistance, but they're stretched a little more thin, and so some of our county schools, it's harder to get those deputies out there directing traffic. But it is something that we consider, and you know, we will work with the agency to help us through that process.
One thing, if I could add too, is that in this particular instance, having a school closer to your home typically reduces other traffic areas. So for example, my wife drops the kids off at Pleasant Hill in the morning. That's a tough left on the Rawl. And when you're coming out of there, it's an even more impossible left coming back. So this is going to eliminate those Rocky Creek folks driving across town to come over here. So in lots of ways, it's going to reduce traffic is the lesson that I've taken from this. By being able to build the more neighborhood-style school, you're reducing the drive from, say, Kelsey Glen all the way over to Pleasant Hill.
We've got parents who now come in front of Lexington High School that won't do that anymore. So you're creating traffic for other schools by where schools are located. So by putting those parents over at Beechwood, they'll stay isolated to that area and won't cross over, and that can help as well.
Board, any other questions or comments?
Yes, in the past, we usually had maps and proposed attendance lines out back for people to pick up. What's the reason for not doing that this time?
Mr. Salters?
We posted it online. We can produce those maps as well.
Trying to be green.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a problem. We'll certainly have those available at our community meetings.
Okay, any other questions or comments, Board? Okay. Well, thank you, because I know that is a lot of work, and I want to thank you and Mr. Warren and everybody else that worked on that, because that is not an easy thing. And once again, if I could just say to the community, we so welcome your comments and thoughts, and we will definitely take them into account. We're going to continue on with the superintendent's report. So, Dr. Little?
Sure. So this next report, we're pretty excited about what we're getting ready to see. So our vision statement is to empower each child to design the future. And sometimes that means to design that future through academics. But we also recognize that our students have other needs as well, and that in order to empower them to design the future, that we build a support system for our families that may look different in some areas than others. And so Mr. Caldwell has a presentation tonight that he's going to talk to us about an exciting partnership with some of our medical professionals, and about how we can help design the future for some of our students. So, Mr. Caldwell.
Thank you, Dr. Little, Madam Chair, members of the board. In deference to the time, and I'm sure everybody's wishes here this evening, I will be brief, but I do not want my brevity to be misinterpreted as not a lack of excitement or how thrilled we are to have this partnership with Palmetto Health to increase the access of care to students through the telehealth work. The best way to describe this, our friends in Richland 1 already do this. There is a video on YouTube that's available. It's about 3 minutes. And I think if I show that video, it will kind of give you an idea of what this telehealth is about. And I'll be glad to answer any questions at the conclusion. We are currently working our way toward this, and hopefully later in the spring, we will start this for our schools in the Pillion area, the 4 Pillion schools.
When Cameron was seen at telehealth, the nurse called me in, and I came in under the impression, thinking I was going to sign him out, take him to his doctor's office, and get him treated. She told me about telehealth, and I had to fill out the form, so she kind of like gave me a brief description of what it does, and that he would be able to see a nurse practitioner through a screen, and she can diagnose him right there at the school.
She had brought the computer in front of both of us. Then she had to call the nurse at the hospital. Then she told me what I had.
It was very helpful for me because I didn't have to worry about taking off from work. I didn't have to worry about signing him out of school and he missing that day. And I didn't have to worry about trying to find like where I can take him because his doctor's office don't do same day appointments. So I would have had to end up taking him to the emergency room, which is very time consuming.
When I saw the doctor through telehealth, it was new and exciting because I always had to go to a hospital or my doctor.
Telehealth process works by having a student enter the health room. I perform my normal nursing duties. If I feel that child should be seen with telehealth and if they've consented to telehealth, then I will contact the nurse practitioner. Telehealth has been amazing for me because I've been able to be hands-on with the diagnosing aspect of it all, to actually be here to assist the nurse practitioner, and with her guidance, I've been able to help her with diagnosing these different conditions that the students have had.
I would tell other parents that telehealth is convenient. It's an awesome program. It saves time and money. You don't have to worry about getting off from work, picking your child up and taking them to the pediatrician or to their doctor's office. You can get the same results right at the school in the nurse's office.
Again, there's no way I could have explained it better than that. That's what we will begin this spring at the Pillion Schools, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Will they have parameters? Like, I mean, I'm going to defer to our two physicians on our board, but I mean, like, if somebody, like, what's the limit? Like, would they do a cold or they do, you know?
Well, what will happen, because our school nurses can't diagnose or prescribe, a student comes to the nurse, and the nurse, using her judgment that maybe the child has described symptoms of strep throat, to use that as an example. She'll contact telehealth, a nurse practitioner, or even a physician's assistant, perhaps even a physician, probably a nurse practitioner, would say, yes, those symptoms do sound like strep throat. Let me order for you a quick strep test. I don't know if that's the actual name of that. The school nurse will be able to do the swab, do the test. They'll wait a few minutes. If it is a positive result, then the nurse practitioner can prescribe the medication. They'll contact the parents, they meaning telehealth. They'll contact the pharmacy that we have on file when the parents did the paperwork. They'll contact the parents, so the parents will come to pick up the child, and on the way home, stop by the pharmacy. So there's no leaving work, coming to the school, not being able to get to your primary physician until the next day, or having to go to the emergency room, all those things. So it'll be the judgment of the nurse to decide, is this a telehealth?
How do we contract with a vendor that provides the service, and then also who pays for that?
Palmetto Health will work through the insurance. If the student has insurance, we will do the paperwork for if it's Medicaid. If a student doesn't have insurance, they will not be denied the service. And Palmetto Health will try to plug the family into an insurance carrier, or it's my understanding they have a fund that they can help to pay for uninsured students. The bottom line is we would never turn a student down for the service.
So what if a student has different insurance, and would we contact their provider and go through telehealth, or it's just strictly through that contract? Or we would tell that parent to go to their own provider?
I'm not 100% sure of the answer to this question. I don't know that they are contracted with particular insurance companies. I'm not sure how that part of that works, but it could be that the insurance that a parent has does not pay for telehealth services. And I think at that point we would
Call the parent and they would
that's
come
right.
get the child. Okay. Any questions, board? Any comments?
There'll be a lot of communication with the parents, obviously, and paperwork and consents and things that have to be completed before the student would be seen.
Dr. Guyton, does your office do telehealth?
So this is a tough one. This is actually sort of a dividing line in medicine right now, in that there is an absolute element of convenience. There's an element of providing a need, and to be very conscientious of a parent's time and getting off of work and missed days of work, so on and so forth. On the flip side, there's also the lost art of medicine, if you will, the actual laying of hands on a patient, so to speak. Case that comes to mind, I got a call one time from the ER, go down and listen to the kid, was billed as a routine viral stomach bug. Within 6 hours, the kid was on a heart transplant list because of what we had heard on the exam. We had him flown down to MUSC within 2 hours. And so that's my fear of telehealth, in that it's only going to take a couple few of those, and it's going to uncover a very nasty wound, if you will. So I think there are some very well-placed kind of cookbook medicine things that I think fit very well. The hard part's going to be funneling that down into what are those cookbook things that are very easily identified and treated. And it's tough. I mean, we continually evaluate it. Should we or should we not kind of jump into the telehealth game, if you will? And we just haven't been able to answer those questions yet in terms of comfort.
Thank you.
So.
Do you have a question, Ms.
I do. What kind of impact does this have on our nursing staff, since they'll be doing complete exams?
That is a great question. Currently, we're not planning for any additional FTE or requesting any additional FTE. If this takes off and it is used a lot, then we may need to consider that, because our nurses, once they contact telehealth, they are still plugged in and involved with that student, and so we don't want other students to back up. But in talking with folks at Palmetto Health, that hasn't been a big issue at other sites. It could be with us. It just depends on the utilization of it.
And Mr. Caldwell, you're doing this just in Peelian right now,
It's
right? So
piloting
kind of
it
a
at Peelian,
pilot,
that's
so we
exactly
can
right.
evaluate
Yeah.
some of these questions
That's right.
we have.
That's
I mean,
exactly right.
To me, I mean, I recognize the professionals' concerns, but I think, as we make mental health counselors available in our schools and this telehealth, I mean, I really, especially for Peelian and being a rural school, I mean, I can't help but think that this would be valuable for parents who may have, they may work in Columbia and have to drive out to Peelian to pick up their student to take them to doctor's care on Sunset Boulevard. And so I'm excited to see what the pilot shows.
Have you been working closely with your counterpart at Richland One to find out the pros and cons that they've experienced?
Our lead nurse, Director of Nursing, Amy Wood, has, and also with folks at Palmetto Health. We've had several meetings, and I'm not saying they're in constant contact, but they communicate regularly through this process.
Okay.
And this is at no cost to the district, is that what I'm
That's correct.
understanding?
It all started with I think MUSC received a grant, and they formed an alliance with a lot of schools in the Lowcountry, and formed an alliance with Palmetto Health here in the Midlands, and that's how Richland One got on board, and that's how we came into play.
Well, I'm sure we'll work through our consent process, but I think as a board, we would want to make sure it was clear it wasn't compulsory, and that they are choosing this.
Absolutely.
Because then it's now back on Palmetto Health for the risk of the diagnosis and treatment.
And even if we have the consent form on file, when a student comes to the nurse's office, we would still make every effort to contact the parent, even though we know there's a consent on file. We would contact them prior to telehealth if at all possible.
Oh, so process-wise, is the parent would consent to a telehealth evaluation
That's
even
right.
before they knew that their child was ill?
They would consented to that on the paperwork on the front end.
Okay.
But at the moment that the child is seeking treatment, even though they would have consented weeks ago when they did the paperwork, we would still contact the parent before the telehealth treatment.
Okay. Anything else, board? Well, thank you, Mr. Caldwell. That's very informative, and that video was very interesting. Dr. Little, we're going to continue with you.
All right, I believe we have a legislative update. Ms. Green, are you going to provide some of that information? Okay.
So I'm going to start, and Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Little and guests, we're going to start at the state level where education spent some time in the spotlight with Governor Henry McMaster's when he included education reform in his inaugural speech on Wednesday, the 9th. So he mentioned several areas that Lexington District 1 is already focused on, such as recruiting good teachers, upping teacher pay with our Drive to 35, as Dr. Little calls it, starting salary increase work that we've been doing, and staffing schools with mental health counselors, just as we're doing with our Project Hope initiative. So the legislature began its regular session, if you remember, on the day before the inauguration. And as you remember, this is the first of a 2-year session. So this will be the first year. So anything that any bill that was proposed in the last legislative session, the last 2-year session, that did not make it all the way through, in effect, did what we call die. So any legislator who had a bill like that had to start all over again. So that has led members to reintroduce a lot of bills, just like you mentioned before, Ms. Green, from last year. And you'll find this interesting, in fact, that since the House had their December 18th pre-file day, they have introduced 485 bills. And the Senate, on the other hand, since its December 8th pre-file date, has introduced 365. So as you might expect, many of them, as you can tell from media coverage, deal with education issues such as the teacher salaries, testing, starting date for the school year, school safety. There's been shuffling with some of the leaders in some of the committees. So in the House Representative Lucas was again elected Speaker of the House, and but he immediately made some changes to committee assignments, including a change in the House Ways and Means Committee chair. So Representative Merle Smith from Sumter now serves as chair. Representative Rita Allison from Spartanburg, who's been a friend of education, was reelected to the position of chair of the House Education Committee. And Representatives Paula Calhoun and Chris Wooten, both from Lexington, are now serve on that committee. So that's very good for us and for a way for us to get our message in. In the Senate, on the other hand, Senator Harvey Peeler, as you know, became president of the Senate. So that meant that the Senate Education Committee will begin the session with a new chair, who's Representative Greg Hembry from the Horry County area. Now, Representative Shane Massey, who is listed as Edgefield, does represent the Gilbert area, a good portion of the Gilbert area for us. And so he's one of the committee's newest members on that side. But you can get
as an aside, his wife is a school board member.
Yes, and you can get a complete list of the Senate Education, but all those committee members on the state's legislative website. Now, we promised you that we would give our board an opportunity to talk about the highlights from the South Carolina School Boards Association's annual legislative conference, which was held in early December. And Vice Chair Anne-Marie Greens agreed to do that. And in addition, she was there today, so she might have something else to add.
I do. Thank you, Ms. Hill. So early in December each year, the School Board Association holds a legislative advocacy conference. And there's kind of two purposes for that. One is to make school board members across the state aware of what's kind of on the landscape, the chatter among representatives and senators about what could impact public schools. And then the second part of that is for school board members. The School Board Association lobbies on behalf of school districts. All 81 school districts in South Carolina are members of the South Carolina School Board Association, and that association has a very strong lobbying arm and very effective and very respected at the State House. And part of what we do at the December legislative conference is during a delegate assembly, school board members from throughout the state vote on our priorities so that when questions come up, the bill or a discussion in a hearing, the lobbyists for the School Board Association know how we want them to advocate on behalf of school boards and public schools in South Carolina. So it's a really important conference, and a lot of things come out of that, but I'll just share with you the 5 priorities that the delegates, the school board members from throughout the state set for this year. The first, and these are not necessarily priority order, education funding reform, which is always a topic every year. Local district fiscal impact statements. And what that is a resolution from the School Board Association to require legislators to do a fiscal impact analysis anytime a bill is proposed that will impact a school district, which I think is a smart idea. One of the priorities is local legislation, and that requires, or that proposes to require, that a representative or a senator contact every member of their local school board before they file legislation that impacts that school board, which would be great. Yes. Also, school start date is a big priority for the School Board Association. And then the retired teacher salary cap is also one of our top 5 priorities. There are other priorities and statements of belief that we have passed to guide their arguments and their lobbying, but those are kind of the 5 priorities. I was at the State House today during Governor McMaster's budget announcement, and one of the things that happens is the governor, a lot of the education bills, the funding bills, haven't even been filed yet because our state legislators are Republicans and governor is Republican, and so they're waiting to find out what his priorities are before they file legislation to accomplish what his goals are. And one of the things that he proposed today as part of his budget recommendations, executive budget, was to increase the base student cost by $10. And I just did a little bit of research on that because that's really not very much. And in the past 8 years, even though education funding has not been terrific, in the past 8 years, our 8-year average base student cost increase has been $107 each year. So, some years it's been really high, some years it's been, $18 or $19, but to propose $10 really is just astonishing that that's what he wrote into his recommendation. Some of the other things that let's see, I've got it right here. He proposed a 5% across the board salary increase for teachers. When you go through there are all kinds of bills that have been pre-filed already or filed, but you've got to read all the way to the bottom, and some of them sound like really good ideas. There's a bill right now to require local school boards to give teachers a 15% pay increase, period. There's no funding with it. So we would have to do it without any funding. And they really like to do that, to require us to do things without actually giving us money. He also proposed $46 million to provide an SRO for school districts that aren't able to pay for their own. There are a number of school safety bills that have been proposed. He also proposed $100 million for joint education and commerce infrastructure in school districts that, in the poorest school districts in the state. But when you read down into that, it sounds like it's for school construction, and it's $100 million. Well, our building package is $363 million for our district alone. So $100 million for 22 school districts isn't going to go very far. But what he's done is he has designated in his proposal that this money goes to the Commerce Department to spend as they see fit to enhance the education landscape in these 22 districts. So they can use it for business incentives, they can use it to improve sewer or internet access in those areas, or to repair school buildings, but that's not compulsory. The Commerce Department can use that $100 million however they choose to improve those districts. So it's an interesting year. There's a lot of talk about education at the State House, and this is going to be a really good year for advocacy and phone calls and emails. So just kind of stay tuned, because we'll definitely keep you informed, because we do have a lot of our Lexington County delegation on those education committees, and they're willing to listen, and so we just need to make sure that we talk to them. So thank you.
And then just want to thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I think we're working toward a resolution that
Yes.
I know we talked into last week that I think we'll hopefully be ready in the next board meeting or two. We, speaking to Lexington One's support to raise teacher salaries. So
That's cool.
by our legislature. So thank you for all your leadership and work
Oh,
there.
you're
and
welcome.
We look
And if
forward
you're
to
just
seeing it.
curious, you go out to scstatehouse.gov. There's a option for quick search, and you can just put in, like today, I searched on teacher, and 72 bills have been filed, having to do directly impacting teachers in some way. And education, 252 bills. So everybody has a lot of ideas, and very, very few of them are good ideas,
Or funded ideas.
or
I mean,
funded
that's-
ideas, and some of them are really, really bad ideas. And so it really helps to kind of pay attention. There are a number of listservs that you can subscribe to that will send you updates. I know Superintendent Spearman, her office is doing a really good job of kind of blasting out information. So just if you're not on Twitter, get on Twitter and follow her and some of her folks, because I think this is a really important year to pay attention, because we want to make sure that what we get is what we want. And so we just need to pay attention to the details.
Ms. Green, I saw the announcement from Governor McMaster's office. Do we know, like, the money he's allocated for SROs and the 5% increase for teachers? Is it a single time money allotment, or is it recurring funds?
He has, the 5% he specified was recurring funds. The SRO money, I believe, is just a one part of that extra pot of money. And he's got there are 20 things he wants to do with that extra pot of money. He wants to do, for example, there's $100 million for the infrastructure, but there's $200 million for a tax rebate. So if you get your check for $11 in November, you can give it to the Education Foundation. I mean, there are a lot of competing priorities, and there's a lot of money available this year.
Yeah.
Because of the budget that's expected. Just one other thing. At our school board conference back in December, one of our presenters was Mike Rainwater with, who is he with, John? The South Carolina Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office. Yeah. And they were tasked by, I think, a Senate committee to produce a report, factors and trends affecting state funding for public education, and it's an incredibly informative report. It takes every school district in the state and breaks it down in a bunch of different ways. If you're a data cruncher, and it'll take the number of students and how compare that to each district's funding for instruction and administration and buildings. I mean, it's probably 40 pages of report. If you're interested, I'd be happy to email the link to you, because it really does kind of give you an idea of what the legislators are going to be looking at this. Hopefully they'll actually pay attention to the details. But if you're interested in it, I'd be happy to send it to you. Just see me afterwards and I'll email it to you.
That was a really good conference, and Mr. Anderson, Ms. Green, Ms. Garris, and I attended, and the other three gentlemen had prior commitments. But the thing that I just walked away with was the surplus and how they're going to spend that. I have a feeling by the time that's voted in, it will not look anything like what Governor McMaster presented today. And the other thing, just keep your eye out. It's called the Wayfair. It was a Wayfair law where, I don't know if anybody shops, but there's a company called Wayfair. And if you buy something at Wayfair in certain states now, you are not taxed. Well, they've ruled that you should be taxed. And so it's not good for the shoppers, but it's great for school districts, because now, just like you go to Walmart and you pay local taxes, you'll pay local taxes for any of those products you buy on the internet. Well, that will be some income, hopefully, that will come back to our school district. So it's going to be real interesting to watch how that plays out. And that gentleman, Mr. Rainwater, was talking about that's going to be something we all need to keep an eye on, because, as you know, the tax base for shopping is going down because so many people shop on the internet. And this is a way to even the playing field, because it's very unfair to the moms and pops that you shop here and you go in your car and you pay taxes. you go online and you buy this stuff and you don't pay taxes. So it'll level the playing field for the moms and pops. And it will be a good thing for school districts because we will get some of our revenue back that we were getting before the internet was
And
the
Ms. Smith,
main
just one
shopping
other little
place.
funny anecdote I overheard today. So there's actually some folks, y'all recall that there was a big lottery ticket winner in South Carolina that hasn't come forward yet? They're actually already spending the state's portion of the unclaimed lottery money. I mean, that's part of the conversation. Well, you know, that ticket may be in a landfill somewhere, but that's how they think, is that virtual money is actual money. And so, you know, when they get, you know, April 15th and all of a sudden they're dealing with real dollars, things may be a little bit different.
Yeah. But Ms. Green is our representative. She is our advocacy representative for the district. She's been doing this since she started on the board. And let's just thank her because she's doing such a good job. And Ms. Hill, we thank you too because you have to keep up with all that, and there's a lot to keep up with, so thank you for that. Dr. Little?
All right, well, that concludes my report.
Okay, great. Okay, we're now to 12.0. Board, these are items for your information. They were included in your packet. And just for information only. And item 13.0 is adjournment. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Oswald. All in favor, please say aye and stand up. Aye, and it's unanimous. Thank you.